Okay, this is sort of a review section, but it also reviews some skills that were in a different course or that we haven't really covered deeply. So this textbook covers the following types, all of them. We need to know how to do all of these to prepare for your next math course, but we're going to be focusing on 3 of these 6. Okay, so first of all, back in section 2.1, solving linear equations, this is the type of equation where the variable that we are solving for only appears once. And addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, it's one variable. Sorry, it can appear more than once. Okay, you got it basically. So we're going to distribute the 3. I'm just doing this for a review because you don't want to ever forget these skills. And then you get the variables to the x's to one side and the constants on the other. And then you divide by the coefficient or the number in front of x. And so we would get a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So it looks like our solution is 3/2. You can plug this back in to check. I'm not going to do this on every single one of them, but I will do it on this one. So instead of x, I'll put 3/2 minus 1 should be 4 times 3/2. This is my check. All right, so these cancel. So I get 3 times 3 minus 1 is 2. And 4 times 3 is 12 over 2, and they do check. Okay, the second type of equation in this textbook is back in chapter 4.2 and 4.3. This is solving a system of linear equations. There are at least 3 ways to do this. We can do it by graphing, which is what we've done in this, a little bit of that. But I would also want to show you another method called elimination or addition. Okay, so this we have 2x plus y equals 1, and we have another equation in x and y. And these 2 equations are rigged, so I can use this procedure. Okay, so when you have 2 equations with 2 unknowns, one thing you can do is if you line up the variables, you can add these together, and sometimes it's called elimination and sometimes it's called addition. But if you add 2x plus negative 2x, I get 0. And the whole point is I eliminated one of the variables. And if you have 1y minus 2y, you have negative 1y. I'm writing the negative 1 there for all of us. And 1 plus negative 4 is negative 3. And then if I divide both sides by negative 1, I get y equals 3. Now, once you have one variable, you can plug it back into an equation. Let me take the first one. And so I know y is 3, so instead of 2x plus y, I'll say 2x plus 3. And then I can solve the equation for x. And I get 2x equals negative 2, and x equals negative 1. And then I would like to make sure that those both this point, it's either a point if you graph it, negative 1, 3, or just the variables x equals negative 1, y equals 3 work in both of these equations. So I would have 2 times negative 1 plus 3 should give me a 1, and that does work. And I should have a negative 2 times negative 1 minus 2 times 3 should give me a negative 4. That's 2 minus 6. Yes. Okay, so again, if you need some reviewing on that, that's in sections 4.2 and 4.3. Okay, and another type of equation we talked about a little bit is solving equations with roots in them. And you've got a square root somewhere. And so what we do is we isolate the radical and then raise both sides to the power. So if it's a square root, we square it. If it's a cube root, we cube it. Okay, so I'll do the one on the left. First, we isolate that radical. So let's minus 4 from both sides. And then I'm going to square both sides. Okay, and we got to be careful when we do things like squaring both sides or square rooting both sides. We may get extraneous solutions, so we want to make sure on this type of problem to check our solutions for sure. Okay, so if I square a square root, they disappear, they undo each other, and so I have x minus 2, and 2 squared is 4, and then it becomes an easy equation, x equals 6. We must check that. So let's go back to our original equation. And instead of x here, I'm going to put 6 minus 2. square root, and then see if I get the square root of 4. My goodness. Okay, so that would be the square root of 4, which is 2 plus 4 equals 6, and that checks. Okay. All right, now this one we're going to, it's to the cube root, so we're going to cube both sides to the third power, because a cube root and a cube undo each other, so we get our x minus 5, and 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And then we can add 5 to both sides and we get 13. So let's check that. So is the cube root of 13 take away 5 equal to 2? Well, the cube root of 8 is 2, and that checks. Okay, don't forget you can always check these by graphing each side of the equation and finding the point of intersection. Okay, now we did cover quite a bit on solving quadratic equations. Section 10.7, factorings, 13.3, completing the square, and 7.1 and 7.2 would be quadratic formula and square rooting both sides. But we did talk about all of those in this course. So I think what I did is I chose to do the two that you might not be as familiar with. So I'm going to use the quadratic formula on this one. You always want to remember that, puppy. Okay. So that would be the opposite of b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so a is 3, b is 2, c is negative 4. So we'll do the opposite of b, plus or minus. B squared is 4 minus 4, a is 3, c is negative 4. And then all over 2 times a. Okay, so that gives us a negative 2 plus or minus. Now, the discriminant, which is what's underneath this radical, is going to be 4 plus, because it's a minus minus, 12 times 4 is 48. Okay, and that's going to be 6 below us. So we have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 48 plus 4 is 52. Ooh, I bet we have to simplify that. And let's see, the square root of 52, that's going to be 4 times 13. So we're going to get negative 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 13 all over 6. And if I've guided you before to rewrite these separately, they're much easier to simplify. So I put both of them over 6, and I will get negative 1/3 plus or minus negative square root of 13 over 3, because I'm canceling the negative right here, 1/3 and 1/3. Okay, so let's say that's our answer. And you can always change that to decimals too. You could solve it by graphing, okay? All right, I'm trying to get a different color here. Let's try that. Okay, so this is, I'm going to do the square root since we've got a perfect square right here. So first we'll isolate the square. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Not sure why that's happening, but I think it's something I'm touching on my pen. So I'm going to just deal with it. Okay, I'm going to divide both sides by 6, and then we'll have x minus 2 squared equals 2. And then I will square root both sides. So I'll have, okay, so that gives me x minus 2 equals, and this is where we want the plus or minus, the square root of 2. And then if I add 2 to both sides, I would have 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. And those, again, are two decimals that we can check these with graphs. I'm not going to do that for the sake of time because these are typically review. But you know, we've got to know how to do them. So let's practice and practice. Okay, so we've got the rational equations. We did spend quite a bit of time on that, and I'm going to stop the video here and continue that in the next video. So let's go with that.